Manchester City are in crisis. There is quite simply no other way of putting it, and Manchester City fans seem to be getting very annoyed about the language that I'm using. They don't like the fact that I'm calling it a crisis. They would rather I refer to it as a blip, maybe a slump, but I guarantee you this, it is a crisis. 5 in a row for a club like Manchester City is unforgivable. 5 in a row for the champions hasn't been done since 1956 when Chelsea Football Club were champions for the very first time. We won the league in 1955. Think about how long ago that was, and we lost 5 games the following season in a row. Manchester City have just equalised that record. And when we talk about 5 in a row from a Manchester City perspective, what we should be talking about is 5 league titles in a row. At the beginning of the season, 5 in a row this, 5 in a row that. Never did we believe that there was a chance that we would be talking about 5 in a row, and the 5 that we are referring to actually be defeats. It is shocking, and it is unbelievable that it is Tottenham that have compounded their misery. Tottenham started this run, and Tottenham have put them in this position where they are on the brink of total collapse. 5 defeats in all competitions and a vulnerability to this Manchester City side that I have never seen before. And it's very difficult for me to make this point, but a lot of this is Guardiola's doing. This isn't me suggesting that Guardiola isn't a genius. He is. He is a fantastic manager, one of the greatest to have ever done it, and is unbelievable at what he has done. His name will go down in history as being one of the very best who have ever been involved in the game. However, he is at the epicenter of what is going wrong for Manchester City. It's so difficult to make this case. It's so difficult for me to scrutinise his approach when he wins the league every year. It's so difficult for me to now slander Pep Guardiola, considering that he very recently won a treble and is the reigning champion. But bear with me on this, and I would really like your thoughts. Do you think there is any mileage to the point that I'm about to make, that Pep Guardiola is actually facilitating this defeat because of his lack of ability, his lack of navigation, his lack of nuance in the transfer market? I think that he has got it so wrong in the transfer market that basically they have got into this situation and it was always going to come. It's destructive to Manchester City's ambitions. What he has done in that transfer market, it's radical, but they have made so many mistakes. Mateo Kovacic, for example, when he left Chelsea, no Chelsea fan believed that he was the man to elevate that Manchester City midfield. When they brought İlkay Gündoğan back to Manchester City, off the back of letting him go, by the way, they didn't think that he was worthy of a 3-year deal. They brought him back after 1. He was not the man to elevate that Manchester City midfield. And when you look and explore that James Maddison first goal from Dejan Kulusevski, I mean, what a player he is, by the way. But if you watch James Maddison's forward, progressive, ambitious, aggressive run, and you watch what İlkay Gündoğan does, he just stutters. He would have never done that 5 years ago. And he isn't the only one. But if Mateus Nunes was the type of player that Pep Guardiola should have signed, that goal isn't scored. If Calvin Phillips had been the kind of player that Pep Guardiola should have signed, that goal isn't scored. If Jeremy Doku was the player that they hoped he would be, maybe they would have had more ammunition at the other end. Jack Grealish, 100 million, has it really worked out? And the elephant in the room is Phil Foden. You know, Dejan Kulusevski is everything that Phil Foden should be. Everything that I wanted Phil Foden to be at the Euros was on display from Dejan Kulusevski. What has happened to last season's Player of the Year? Pep Guardiola needs to take some responsibility. Of course, Phil Foden does. And we obviously flagged that. But Pep Guardiola has that ability of sprinkling the stardust over his very best. And that simply is not happening at the moment. And the lack of ability in navigating the transfer market is massively costing them. There is also a huge issue. You know, when we talk about transfers, I think most people have a propensity to do this. You talk about transfers and you always focus on the players that you sign. Did we have a good transfer window? And you focus on who did we bring into the club. Sometimes the revolving door is very important when discussing a transfer window. And I am afraid that this is the jewel in the crown that demonstrates that Guardiola has made a pig's ear of the Manchester City transfer window over recent years. How is Cole Palmer not providing goals for Erling Haaland? Can you imagine Cole Palmer and Erling Haaland linking up together? Can you imagine the amount of goals that they would create for one another? You know, when you think about those amazing partnerships, when you think about the partnership between Heung-min Son and Harry Kane, between Didier Drogba and Frank Lampard, assists to one another. I'm convinced that Cole Palmer and Erling Haaland would have broken all of those records. I mean, Cole Palmer and Nicholas Jackson have a very impressive record of providing goals for one another. So just imagine if you were to elevate Cole Palmer's partner in that equation, what would be going on? And again, because Manchester City won the league last year, it was very easy to paint the decision of allowing Cole Palmer to leave. You could paint it in a positive colour. You could say that it was okay because they won the league. You could say they didn't really miss him because they won the league. You could say, yes, he did very well at Chelsea, but doing it at Chelsea is a different level. Since then, he's scored for England in a Euro final. He is the man for the big occasions, and this is the crucial thing of why it's Guardiola's fault. He always was. He's already scored goals for finals, for Man City in finals in Europe. He's already scored goals for Manchester City at Wembley when a trophy is at stake, albeit a very, very insignificant one. So I do think that there is a lot to talk about here because I do not understand how Manchester City have got themselves into this situation. The last time that Manchester City went on a run this bad, Stuart Pearce, 2005-06. Do you remember that team? Do you remember how average that team was? It had some of the worst players that maybe Manchester City... If Manchester City made a worst ever 11, some of these players would be in it. It's the likes of Joey Barton. Players as average as that. It really is. And now, this Manchester City team are emulating that. Stuart Pearce as manager and Joey Barton in the side. It was Bradley Wright Phillips. It's unbelievable that this Guardiola team are in this situation, but anybody that's on the fence about is it a crisis, isn't it a crisis, this should tip you over the edge. If Manchester City get beat and make it 6 in a row next week, they will end up 11 points behind Liverpool. That means that the title is over, and Manchester City will simply have to focus on somehow winning the Champions League, going to the Allianz Arena in Munich, winning it in Pep Guardiola's former home. They will have to become a cup team. And for Manchester City and everything that we know about Manchester City, that is simply not good enough. How they have got themselves into this situation, I do not know. But they simply have to beat Liverpool. And if they do, it's going to be huge for the title race. Because if they somehow do manage to take 3 points against Liverpool, which I don't think they will, but if they do, suddenly the door is ajar for Arsenal to be back in the title race. And it becomes a title race, 3 horses, where the points tally could be a lot lower than necessarily expected. But my suggestion is that Liverpool will just romp home. They are unstoppable. Kyle Walker disagrees. He's been speaking articulately, speaking passionately about how he believes that it can be done. He thinks that they are capable of winning the league. He believes that everything will click for Manchester City, but I'm afraid that I just don't see it that way. I thought Pep Guardiola looked as if he was out of ideas. I think Pep Guardiola looked as if he was incredibly struggling. And let's face it, the Rodri, like we saw Rodri, didn't we, parading around the Manchester City midfield with his Ballon d'Or trophy. They just cannot live without him. You know, this midfield of Rico Lewis, Ilkay Gundogan, Bernardo Silva, Savinho at times, it's lightweight. Like, where is the personality? Where is the stature? Where is the frame? Where is the icon? Whether that's Rodri, whether it's Fernandinho, it doesn't matter. Every midfield needs that statement player. And Rico Lewis is a lovely footballer, but he's not that. Ilkay Gundogan looks so off it. And I am afraid that midfield of Lewis, Gundogan, Bernardo Silva, Savinho, they're going to get run ragged by Liverpool. They are going to get absolutely run ragged. They got run ragged by Tottenham. You know, we have to talk about how well Tottenham did, by the way. They were sensational. I would go so far as to say that for Tottenham Hotspur, that is their best ever result in the Premier League era. Lots of people contest that. They say to me, maybe the Manchester United 6-1, but I completely disagree. Firstly, doing it in front of fans is more significant. Secondly, doing it at the home of the champions is more significant. And ultimately, going to Manchester City, scoring 4, delivering the first defeat at home for Manchester City for 50 years, 50 games. It's huge. It really is a massive result for Tottenham and one of the best in the Premier League era. They also, the nature of the performance, they were so good. I mean, James Maddison scoring 2 on his birthday, including a deft chip, sensational. But the player that we have to focus on is Dejan Kulusevski. Just ran the show, didn't he? There was it was actually the very definition of unplayable. You know, when you think about when we say players are unplayable against a particular opposition or in a particular fixture, we don't always mean that. But I think Manchester City did not know what to do with Kulusevski. If he dropped deep to pick the ball up, they didn't know whether to go with him. If he drove at them, they didn't know whether to press or whatever. And whatever decision Kulusevski made, it was the right one. When he played it to feet, they thought he was going to play it into space. When he played it to space, they thought he was going to play it into feet. He was just perfect. What an exceptional player he has turned into. Really, really brilliant. So for Tottenham, symbolic. Historic, I would go so far as saying. For Manchester City, they are in crisis. And if they do not beat Liverpool, the title is kaput. In fact, I would go so far as saying that the title is kaput for them anyway. Let me know your thoughts on this. One more thing, just to ask you your opinions on. Phil Foden. I was going to touch on it in this video. You know, he scored 1 goal all season. It's just not good enough for the player of the year last year. You think about the player that we hoped he would be at the Euros. He hasn't had a good game now for what? 6 months? It's perplexing. I can't work it out. Your counsel, I'd love your advice and help me produce this channel. I'm thinking of doing a deep dive into the form of Phil Foden. Something I should do. If you think that's a good idea, maybe let me know in the comments or give the video a like, because I am baffled by what's going on with Phil Foden. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really do hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say. And if you've really enjoyed it, please do me a massive favour. Click that subscribe button. Hugely helps me out. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.